Hello there, my name is Jonathan McIntosh, and in this video I want to talk to you about how to succeed with written assessments, particularly assessments that require you to write in formal English, such as coursework essays or reports. And hopefully this video will give you some top tips and advice on how to polish your piece of writing, how to gain extra marks through focusing on specific points, and how to make the best impression on your marker that you can. So I'm going to discuss three main points in this video. So I'm going to discuss first the importance of formal English expression and why this is important when it comes to essays and reports, for example. I'm then going to outline why careful editing and proofreading leads to ultimate success with essays. And I'm going to provide some of these extra tips and advice that I can give you as a marker, as someone who's marked essays for a long time, and give you insight into what we look for as markers when we read your work. So, to begin with, when you're asked to write an essay or a report, unless otherwise stated in the unit guide, markers expect you to adopt a formal tone and use formal English. It's very important to point out that the way in which you write in terms of formal English is very different to how you might speak. Speak as if I'm speaking to you in this video, or if you're giving a presentation in class, for example. The way we speak is quite different sometimes from the way that we write, and this can be quite difficult for some students to master developing this kind of formal tone or formal voice in their writing. So here are some tips in order to help you write in a more kind of formal fashion. So the first point is to try and avoid the use of slang. Slang also refers to informal forms of writing as well. So instead of saying, making a statement, for example, such as, that's what's on the screen, I think Macbeth's a loser. Okay, the term loser is slang, and it's just not a very correct way of saying this statement. In formal writing, you could say it like this: Macbeth's horrific choices cause him to lose everything he holds dear. Wife, children, wife, friends, crown, and king. In effect, the formal version is actually still saying Macbeth is a loser, because Macbeth makes the wrong choices, and because he makes the wrong choices, he loses all of these things. So he is a loser. But in an essay, we don't want you to write someone's a loser. We want you to use formal English in order to say the same thing. Try to avoid the use of abbreviations in formal English. So, for example, is a written out term that is the correct form of saying e.g. Use among other examples or and so forth instead of the abbreviation etc. And use terms like that is or in other words instead of i.e. It helps to polish the writing again and shows that you really understand formal written expression. Try to avoid sexist language in formal English. So instead of writing man is a literate being, write people are literate beings. Again, it shows awareness and use of language. Elision is another point that markers see a lot in undergraduate essays, and we use elision in our spoken speech so often that we don't necessarily think about it. So elision is also known as contraction, and that's when we take two words and kind of connect them, mostly two words, and connect them together with apostrophes. So use the full written out terms such as cannot, do not, would not, have not, it is, instead of the contracted versions: can't, don't, wouldn't, haven't, it's. Again, elision is very common in undergraduate work, and if you can catch elision, again, it makes the writing flow much more, seem more formal to the marker. Try to be careful with logic and presenting your own opinion. Avoid, unless the essay topic specifically asks for you to voice or give your opinion, don't. We don't want to know what you have to think about a particular topic in most formal assessments. Of course, you have an opinion because you have to formulate a thesis or a research question to answer, or how you're going to interpret the question for the essay. However, you've got to use sources. That's the references cited at the end of the essay and used in the essay to help construct and support your argument. When it comes to writing clear sentences, try to be direct and also interesting. There is a fine line between adopting simple language that's clear and simple language that can be monotonous to the reader. I always encourage my students to write, wherever possible, in the present tense. So Jones, 1990-21, states that, instead of, in his paper entitled Music of the Baroque Era, Jones stated that, again, it's just a very long, roundabout way of saying Jones states that, or it has been stated by Jones that, in the passive voice, avoid that. Simple words and constructions are best. They have an immediate impact in terms of language. And short sentences can have impact, but you also want to keep your reader interested in the story that you're telling in the essay, so try and vary your language, sentence structures, to keep us interested as readers. Avoid long sentences or a series of clauses strung together with because or and. It means that your idea gets lost if the sentence is too long. Generally, if a sentence is more than 3 lines long, you need to edit it, you need to cut it in half, or you need to redevelop it in a particular way. Use linking and transition words in formal English to help you develop a better sense of written expression and flow to your essay. So this is always helped by organising your materials so that one point is connected to the next, and then use phrases such as however, nevertheless, moreover, in conclusion, in light of this, consequently, similarly, in contrast, on the one hand, on the other hand, notwithstanding. These words add interest and value to your argument. They also help you to structure the points you want to make and to propose different material, different points of view by using transition words. Don't go overboard with transition words, because then it's very obvious to the reader that you're just appropriating as many transition words as possible. And try not to use however all the way through an essay. I've seen some students do it, and it becomes a bit boring and monotonous and shows kind of a lack of awareness for the use of English. Italicize all foreign terms that you may use in an essay. So these might be the terms from the names of instruments, such as sitar or tabla, or gamelan instruments such as saron and kanong, and so forth, as opposed to etc. there in that slide. But don't italicize like the word gamelan, for example, because it's a term that's actually been adopted into the English language. Any musical terms that you might use, you should also italicize these. So for example, the term for mode in Javanese gamelan music, batat, or the terms rag and tal, meaning melodic mode or meter in North Indian Hindustani music. In my experience from marking essays, students can sometimes have problems with a number of issues, and I'm raising them here so that when you edit and proofread your essay, you can kind of watch out for these points, and by watching out for them and correcting any mistakes that you may have, it helps the marker to award the essay a higher mark. So take care with sentence structure. Make sure that the subject of the sentence or the clause is clear, and that each sentence has a finite verb. So you need to have a verb in a sentence. It's not a sentence without one. Be careful with punctuation. Punctuation is used to mark off elements of meaning and to designate their respective values. So if you think of a piece of music, it's performed in a particular way that's using phrasing and dynamics, punctuation is similar. It plays a similar role. Be scrupulous with the use of apostrophes. We don't want to see any greengrocer's apostrophes, and remember that IT, S is a contraction or elision of it is, and you really shouldn't be including contractions in a formal essay, whereas ITS without an apostrophe designates possessive ownership of something. Take care with spelling for essays. Consult a good dictionary, and make sure that you use Australian rather than American spelling. You can change the language on your word processing program quite easily. Now, most of these programs have spell checkers, so please use them, but also be aware that spell checkers are not foolproof, and dictionaries can really help you in this circumstance. Editing and proofreading makes or breaks an essay in circumstances, and depending how well an essay has been edited and proofread, it can make the difference between an essay going up into the next band or staying in a slightly lower marking band. So it makes the difference between a credit and distinction essay, distinction and high distinction, for example. This is also a process that takes time and can't really be rushed. So I always encourage my students to finish the assessment a few days before the submission date. After they have finished the draft of the assessment or edited it once, maybe, leave the computer, go out for a walk, go swimming, go shopping, etc. Then come back and look at the draft of the essay with fresh eyes. So it can also be helpful to put the essay away for a couple of days and then come back to look at it again. And sometimes, because we've been looking at a draft of an essay on a screen for such a long time, it's a very useful exercise to print off the essay and edit on paper, because we then have more of a tendency to see things, new things that we're not seeing on the screen. And printing out the essay and giving it to a colleague to read or a friend is also another way to gain feedback on the structure of the essay. Are the ideas clear? And also the written expression. Someone who doesn't really know an awful lot about the topic of your essay should be able to still follow the main gist of what you're saying and to arrive at the conclusions that you're making if you have a really clear structure and you have good expression in the essay. So editing helps to catch spelling, grammar, punctuation, syntax errors, and helps you to revise the language that you use. Some questions to ask when you're editing and proofreading, and these can be questions that you ask a friend to help you with when they look over a draft, for example. Have you addressed the task? Have you answered the question? Which seems quite basic, but some students just don't do this, and then they're disappointed with the mark that they receive. Does your argument make sense? Have you interpreted the question correctly, and have you set out a logical way to address the questions or the points that are raised? Does the assessment have a clear structure? Do you state the question and a thesis in the introduction and outline how the structure of the work will help you to address the thesis? Do you then have well-developed paragraphs in the body of the text with good transitions between each paragraph, and recognise that each paragraph focuses on one point? And does the conclusion draw the various strands of the essay together, and is it well grounded in terms of what is said in the body of the essay? In terms of structure, the introduction and the conclusion should be approximately 10 to 15% of the overall word limit. So try and bear that in mind in terms of balance. Have you included relevant sources in order to help explain, substantiate, and support the points that you're making? Check topic sentences and transitions. Make sure that you varied the transitions throughout the essay. Are the examples and the quotes that you've used in the essay, are they relevant? Do they help answer the question? Do you need to include all the quotes that you've included in the draft, or can you edit these quotes down or even paraphrase these quotes? Have you used a consistent style of in-text referencing throughout the essay? That's quite a key issue to demonstrate to the reader that you understand the referencing requirements for the discipline. And have you remained within the set word limit? Sometimes students ask, can we be 10% under, 10% over, and generally markers are flexible in terms of being 10% over or 10% under. But word limits are set for a reason, and you should be able to answer the question fully within a set word limit. So include the word count after the conclusion, but before the list of works cited, which should be on a separate page, and the works cited should be listed alphabetically by the author's surname, not grouped by format. Take advantage of the library at university. There are many programs that are available, including understanding the ins and outs of the English language, if English is not your first language. But you can also get extra assistance and advice on your essay or your assessment. The library at Monash University offers all students 10 to 15-minute consultations with a learning skills advisor or a librarian. And you don't need to book these appointments, you can just rock on up. Again, that's an example of colloquial language as opposed to formal English language. You can go to the Matheson Library from Monday to Friday, anytime between 11 AM and 3 PM, and the learning skills advisors or the librarians will be seated in the research skills area on the ground floor. You can go as individuals or in small groups if you're working on a group project, and students are seen on a first come, first served basis. You can't use these appointments to get learning skills advisors or librarians to read or proofread your essay, and they will not help you write your essay, but they will help you with specific points that you may have, such as topic sentences or the use of transition words, and they will be able to point you in the direction of other learning resources available via the library website. When you submit the essay or the assignment, it's very important that you follow any instructions that are on Moodle or in the unit guide. First appearances really matter when markers are assessing essays. So imagine you are a lecturer and you have 60 essays to mark. Every time you open a word processing file, if the file has been submitted online, the first thing that you're going to look at is how the essay looks. And if the essay looks well formatted, if it's double spaced and 12-point font is used and it's an easy font to read, such as Times New Roman or Arial, it puts the reader at ease, and the reader looks at it and goes, oh, this looks like a really well formatted essay. I'm going to enjoy reading this. Whereas if an essay isn't double spaced, if it's not 12-point font and it's a weird font that's used, it can make the reader or the marker apprehensive right from the beginning, and you want to avoid that. Make sure that each page has a number and that there are wide margins. The use of wide margins helps a reader to scan in between the lines much more easily if there are wide margins. Ensure to keep a backup of the assessment on a thumb drive or on another device, and print out and keep a hard copy of the essay or each assessment. The number of times that students have come to me and said, oh, my computer crashed, I've lost everything, or my thumb drive's not working. Keep backups as you go and print out copies every so often. Follow the instruction guides. So for example, if you're asked to use a template or a marking rubric, please do that. The instructions are there not to hinder the submission process, but they're there to streamline the marking process for the reader when they have multiple assessments to mark. So, in conclusion, unless otherwise indicated in unit guide or mentioned by the unit coordinator or lecturer, use formal English for university assessments, particularly essays and report writing. We've talked a lot about editing and proofreading and some of the points that you can look for when you're looking at or revising your own work. These might seem lots of little points, but if you manage to pay attention to most of these points, you will be probably quite surprised at the high mark that your essay will receive. As markers, we want to give you marks. We don't necessarily want to take marks away. And if you have lots of little things wrong with your essay, it can create a kind of cumulative effect in the for the marker, and then this means that they take off more marks, or they're not able to give you more marks, I should say. And take advantage of all the fantastic services that are offered by your university, such as working with a library skills advisor. And you can take your work to these individuals and they can help to polish the final versions of the assessments, and they can do this by helping you to focus on specific elements such as transition words or the use of language throughout your assessment.